Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the good ship Ancestry with me, your captain, Johnny Vedmore. And we're going to go through the family history today of none other than Jordan B. Peterson. Welcome to Who Do They Think They Are?
Students ask me sometimes why I study history. It's like, well, because history is about you. That's why. It's like history tells you who you are. You can't because you only live a little while. How the hell can you figure out who you are? So you need all this collective wisdom and all this dream-like information and all this mythology and all this narrative to inform you about what you are beyond what you see of yourself. Unless you're aware of the heroic stories of the past and the metaphysics of consciousness, let's say, because you don't know what you are, what you could be, because you're a historical creature.
Hello, you historical creatures, and welcome to this edition of Who Do They Think They Are? With me, your host, Johnny Vedmore, about Jordan B. Peterson, this Jordan B. Peterson character. Have you heard about him? Yes, they're talking about him around town. Everybody knows about him, and he seems like an interesting character. So we should find out more about his family tree. That's what I think, because I like to find out more about family trees. And when you do, you'll discover that Jordan B. Peterson is Genghis Khan! Or at least that's what most people feel when they talk about genetics. We put masks on ourselves. We put masks on other people. And society puts a mask on us. And we are none of those things. Hey, you've got 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, and 32 great-great-great-grandparents, and so on and so forth, increasing exponentially through time. So you are not just one person. You're not someone who existed 500 years ago, but you are a collection of thousands of people. I tell you, if you go back 20 generations, you end up with 1 million ancestors. Yeah, related to 1 million, not directly, but related to 1 million different people. That's how many ancestors you've got. That's how human nature works. That's how time works. None of those people exist at once. We all exist as a long thread of stories, and stories go back in history, and this we will go back in history. I promise you that, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to go back today. We're going to go further than I ever thought we could go, to be perfectly honest. What do you think? Where do you think we'll end up? Do you think we'll end up in the 1500s? No, we'll go back further. Do you think we'll end up at the turn of the century, or turn of the millennium? Not the last millennium, the millennium before? No, we'll go back further. Do you think we'll end up in 518? No. My friends, we will go back further. What about Jesus? The time of Jesus? No. I gone further than that, my friends. We're going all of the way. I mean, we're going all the way. We're going on an adventure, and there is no better place to start than Jordan B. Peterson's Norwegian family tree. And we'll start off with, of course, Walter Peterson being born to Stanley Willard Peterson here, who was born in Minnesota, United States, in 1913. And died in Canada, Saskatchewan, in Nicam, which is where most of the family ended up settling. And he had married Bernice Josephine Kittleson, who was also born in Minnesota, also, of course, died in Saskatchewan. Now, Stanley's parents were really important to the journey, to this journey of all of these. I think in most of these families, it seemed that the Bern's journey is very telling of Scandinavians who are entering into the New World. And the best way to find out about it is listen to Jordan B. Peterson talking with his father, Walter.
Now, my great-grandfather, your grandfather, Bernd, from whom my middle name is derived, he came to North America from Norway.
No. He was born in North Dakota or in Minnesota.
So as you heard there, Jordan B. Peterson was asking his father, Walter, how he was trying to find out how Norwegian Bernd Peterson actually was. only to discover that Bernd Peterson was actually born in America. And he was born in North Dakota, in Van Milton Cavalier, in 23rd of April, 1884, making him a Dorian, so you can't trust him at all. I'm a Dorian. And we can click on to Bernd Peterson here, and we can see him there with his lovely wife Clara, looking very smart indeed. And we can see some of the information we've got that shows his parents and his birth and his residence at certain times, that he appeared on a census, different census. So the Canadian census of 1916, United States census of in 1920. So we can see that the arrival in Canada happened in 1910, and the naturalization happened. So we got a document here that in 1916 showing he was naturalized in 1914, and that's just as the war was starting, and the naturalization process seemed to end in 1917. Now, there is some very interesting stuff here, which we can find out more about Bernd Peterson by listening to Jordan B. Peterson, and then we'll go further.
Was it his father that came?
Yeah, his father and his father-in-law.
Did you tell me they built a boat and came to Norway, or came from Norway to New York?
That actually was his father-in-law that built the boat. And the two families came. I think there were a total of 9 or 10 on the boat. Yeah. They left Norway and sailed all the way to New York.
And then they ended up in the Midwest, where there were a lot of Norwegian settlers.
So there we heard a fantastic Scandinavian story, didn't we? No, we're not going to get a steamliner and go across to America. We're going to build a boat. And that's what they did. We heard that Bernd Peterson, his father-in-law, who would be Julius Peterson, built the boat along with Hans Peterson and Gelleneggen and Martia Peterson. They went across to the New World, but they likely took their parents or grandparents with them too. And we can find that out by looking at different members of their family. So we can first say, we can look at Hans Peterson, and we can see that he was born in Norway, but died in North Dakota. So he's probably on that journey, isn't he? And there, his wife, Egen, was born in Norway, died in North Dakota. Julius Peterson was born in Norway and died in North Dakota. And Martia Peterson was born in Hedmark in Norway and died in North Dakota. But we also know that if we look back further, if we look at Ingeborg Tollefsdatter, then we can see that she was born in 1835 in Norway, but died in Wisconsin. So she was probably on the boat too. And we can have a look at her in a little bit. And then we look at Peder Peter Egen, and we see that he was born in Norway and also was probably on the boat, died in 1897 in America. But we can see his father was born and died, and his mother was born and died in Norway. So they were the previous generation who probably didn't have the sort of pressures that led to this sort of immigration. Now, if we go and have a look at Ingeborg Tollefsdatter, and we can have a little look at her, what she actually looked like. We can view the profile image and see what we've got here. And there you go. There she is. Ingeborg Tollefsdatter. And there's a nice young stout man there. They all look like they're good Lutherian Norwegians. They got some looks on them, that's for sure. They got some looks on them. But Grandma Ingeborg would have been a massive effect on Bernd Peterson's life. There you go. That's her looking pretty slick there with her Bible, letting everybody know that she's a religious woman. So we know that Grandma Egan, Tulliv's daughter, it came across with them in the boat, most likely. And they said there was 9 to 10 in the boat with them. So that's quite a good amount of people. And we can imagine that Julius Peterson would have also brought his father, Peter Peterson, who, as you see, born in Norway, died in North Dakota, and his wife, his mother, even, North Dakota again. And we can see the last generation before born and died in Norway. Now, one thing you may notice about names is that Julius Peterson and Hans Peterson came over, but they're not brothers. You'd think they're brothers. And was Martia Peterson also called Peterson? Well, it's not as easy as that. You see, the way Norwegians use names is, for instance, Hans Peterson will be the son of Peter, Peter's son. So his father is Peter. You know his father here. We can see is Peter Nilsson Langset. So he is Peter's son. So he, in Norway, was called Peterson. And Julius, his father, is Peter Pedersen, so he's also Peterson. Now, if you look up and see Anderson, you go, I don't understand. Why wouldn't he be Peter? But he is actually Peter Anderson Blackwood. Ulven Blackwood. Very Norwegian name. I think that house with the 3 cups, that banner with the 3 cups, was only created in 1984. This is something you'll see with banners, is that they create the banners in the future and then put it on the house of the past, which isn't really fair. But that's how people were called. They were called after their fathers, so Peter's son. And in a woman's case, it was Peter's datter. That's how it was said. So, for instance, we saw Ingeborg Tollefsdatter. So Ingeborg, her father was Tollef. And we can check that out by looking. There you go. Tollef. Her father was Tollef Andreas Olsen. And so his father was Ole Olsen. See? And his father was Tellefson. See? So that's how they used. And they would also not only use names like that for sons, but as you see, data, and that would be shortened to DR. So everybody knew it was data. So you knew whose father or son you were. But that means by the time it got to the New World and they got to America, something happened, didn't it? The names worked differently, so their last name was sealed forever. So whoever was the grandfather of, or the father of the last person to go across to America or Canada, that person, that granddad's name, or that father's name, would be the prevailing name for the rest of the generations after that, sealed in Peterson forever. They're forever the son of Peter Larsen Eggen. Peter Larsen Eggen. When it says Peter and Peter there, that means that in Norwegian they say Peder, and it is just the English's translation. So they're not called Peder Peter. It's just Peter Larsen, and you tend to say these things because he can't help it. Now we can learn something else very interesting about Jordan Peterson's Norwegian family tree, which gives us a massive insight into the family.
So how many kids did your grandparents have?
They just had the one,
Stanley.
My dad.
And Stanley was adopted.
He was.
And was he adopted in the United States or was he adopted in Saskatchewan?
He was adopted in Saskatchewan.
Do you know if they knew did they know anything about him? Did they know anything about his family?
That I have no idea about. That was something that was never talked about as far as I can remember.
Do you know how old he
I don't
was when
think he
Go
was
ahead.
an infant. He was an infant. I don't think I knew Dad was adopted until I was a teenager. And then I probably didn't believe it the first time I was told.
Was it a shock?
I don't know whether you'd call it a shock or not. It was, I suppose it was a bit of a shock, yeah.
So, and they had no other children?
They had no other children.
So there, shockingly, you hear that Jordan B. Peterson is actually not genetically related to any part of the family past Stanley Peterson. So Bernd Peterson, Clara, Hans, Galena, Julius, and Mattia, and Ingeborg Tollesdatter, and all of the rest of the family back there. They're not actually direct ancestors of Jordan B. Peterson because Stanley Peterson was adopted. He was adopted in Canada by Bernd Peterson and his wife Clara. Now, if you go on to Stanley's records, you will be able to find him listed down in documents like this, which is from a U.S. Evangelical Lutheran Church in America church records. And if you look at 1915, we'll see Stanley Willard mentioned. And it will also say that his parents are Bernd Peterson and his wife Clara. Of course, this is in these records are in most likely in Norwegian Dopsdatum and the Fedelsdatum, as it says there. The Barnetsnaven. That's a barnet, it's a baby, obviously, or child. So it doesn't actually say that Bernd and Clara and his parents. It says that they're his parents. So in all of the records, you wouldn't be able to find out that information unless you had heard Jordan B. Peterson talking with his father there. So it is so vital when you get actual you can actually listen to the people firsthand talking about their relationships, talking about their families, because they're the people who know each other best and know each of their little stories. Every family's got stories. So again, what that means is that Jordan B. Peterson is not related to Hans Peterson by blood. He's not in the bloodline of Hans Peterson. Maybe they are. Maybe there was some kissing cousins on the other side. But it means he's not related to John Nilsson Oversby, or unlikely to be Carl Ivar's daughter Egan's daughter, son, great grandson. And you can see there's a lot of families on this part of the tree that you can go down, and you can get quite far. You get back with Norwegian records to about 1500s. So here you go. That's about as early as you get. Would be Torvald Halvorsen and Gro Olav's daughter. Now, even though we can't see her father there, we can be sure that his name is Olav. That tends to be the way it works. And some of the banners here, like Oslag Torben's daughter, Waldstadt, sometimes they put the mother's name and the father's name in there so people understand, because it gets so complicated. That's like a griffin or a lion holding an axe, which might say that they're a carpentry family or something like this. This might say military family with that crest. The colors will mean something. So all of these things, different things will mean different things. But we're only going to learn a small amount of information by looking through all of these different members of Jordan Peterson's family tree, though Bernd Peterson would have had, and Clara obviously had an effect on both Walter and Jordan and Stanley. So all of them had some form of effect. You can go quite far back in these family histories. But one thing that is going to be notable, as you see, the ones that aren't highlighted mean there's nothing further down that line. The ones that are highlighted there are. But one thing, they're still going to be affected by the people who brought them up. So Jordan B. Peterson is still going to be affected by Walter Peterson and his actions and the way he is, and is still going to be affected by Stanley Peterson and Bernd Peterson because they all had an effect on each other. But you're not going to see repeated genetic traits. You're not going to see tendencies that you would see throughout the family, mental health issues, twitches, eye color, hair color, whatever. All of those things are not going to be related. Still, Norwegians are pretty blonde most of the time. And down this side, of course, of Walter Peterson's family, you've got Bernice Joseph Kittleson. Now, that means that the Kittlesons are related to Jordan B. Peterson by blood. You can see Kittleson took about the same journey. Norway, died in Canada in ICAM, of course. And Olin Rasmin Humbestad. Now, these are relations of Jordan B. Peterson by blood. These are by blood. So maybe if you understood Norwegian, you would be able to look at Christian Parvik and read that information that's on his on this profile, but it's only going to tell you something. And unfortunately, I'm really sorry to say this to Norwegians. I'm sorry to break this to you, but this is not Norway's finest hour. Yes, I've said it. This isn't Norway's finest hour. Norway's finest hour was in the days of the Vikings. Those days were the moments when the Scandinavian houses were at the height, and they started to buy into the other Western houses and lose that strategic advantage and power in about 850 onwards, with Rollo and the becoming Duke of Normandy, his family being given, like, the Vikings, they were raiding people all of the time. And so the Franks came to an idea, okay, what about if we give them a load of the coast of Normandy? Then they can't raid us because they can only raid on the coast. And if we give them the coast, then that stops the raiding completely, and they'll have to deal with us with ground armies, and we're much better with ground armies. So basically an alliance got made, and it worked out really well, but it slowly sewed in all of these Norman houses, these Viking houses slowly got sold into this hierarchical structure that you had of knights and kings and queens and all of that business in Western Europe. No longer did the Vikings have the advantage, and no longer were they the dominant force at that point. That was kind of the end of the Viking era, and that came partially with technology, and technology of warfare and strategy. I mean, giving someone land to stop them attacking you and taking your land seems pretty extreme, and they had to do that with the Vikings because that was the Vikings' proudest hour. So we're just gonna learn a load of Norwegian names, and we're not going to be able to make any sense of who these people actually were. Maybe one or two of them have got a really massive Norwegian in history, but usually that's noted. Usually there's something noted. So it looks like Jordan Peterson's Norwegian family tree is pretty humble. It's a pretty humble family tree. I'll say that. There's a few crests here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary. But if we go across to his maternal family tree, then everything starts to kick off. Everything gets a bit crazy. Now, like I say, Beverly Ann Panath didn't actually live with Francis Conrad Panath and Winifred Agnes Margaret Palmer. That made me, obviously concerned. I'm doing a family tree. I want evidence that they're a family. So what do you look for? You look for a census, you look for birth certificates, you look for death certificates, you look for writing. But I could only find little tiny bits to say, but it is definitely true. Francis and Winifred had Earl in 1929, and Earl is Beverly's brother. And it all this is his grandfather and his grandmother on his maternal side. Jordan B. Peterson has written about Beverly as well, his mother. He's very proud of her, of course, and she's about 85 now, so she's rocking it if she's still about. And over here on the father's side, we run into a problem nearly straight away because Francis Conrad Panaff is pretty traceable. He was born in Ohio in the United States and died as a Scotch. And you can see the journey that they all took up through like places like Germanstown and other places like that to go up. The Norwegians are saying the Germans are Dutch. They were all going through certain routes where their culture was really heavily involved, and then we tended to go up to Canada. I think Canada and Norway have the same sort of climate, and so they can live the same sort of life. But his father, Johann, probably pronounced John Panaff, possibly Panit, possibly Panitz, possibly Pananth. He was born about 1868 in Mubel, Wussendal im Fichtelgebirge, Bavaria. So he's born in Bavaria. But finding him and tracing him is hard. Now, part of the reason why this is in family trees is, of course, you see by the nature of his last name. It might be that his last name was Panitz. But when he went across, people say, "How do you say your name?" Panitz, Panitz, Panetz, Panetz, Panatz, Panit, Panat, Panot. What is it? And then bad handwriting would lead you with the name to slowly whittle down your name to be something that's socially acceptable to others, really. And it's likely that his name became Panath. So tracing him is hard. If I can find that match, that'd be really interesting because we get to see his German ancestry, but we're going to get to some German ancestry anyway. On the other side, Frank Panaff's father, Johann, had got together with Helen Theresa Adelheid Erhardt, who was also from Bavaria, is a little bit more traceable. And we know her father was also a Johann, was Johann, they say Johannes Erhardt, but it's probably Johannes is his name, but they've put it twice in the variations in. Whoever had that record originally. And he was born on 11th of September 1823 in Brand Oberplatz in Bayern in Deutschland. And he married Barbara Kastner, who was also from Bayern. We know just a little bit more. We know that Peter Petrus, so Peter or Petrus Erhardt, had been born in 1790 in Hermelsruf, in Tirschenruf in Bayern. And the mother was Edith Palaf. Now, as I was saying, I mean, not to say the kissing cousins or anything, but a name that changes over time. Palaf and Panaf are closer than Panaf and Panit and Panitz are to Panaf, isn't it? So maybe that's the name that eventually turned into Panaf, and they had kids down the line and whatever. I don't know. But that's all speculation. But that's as far as we can go with the German line over there. We can't go any further with the German line. Maybe we can one day, but we don't need to worry about that because Winifred A.M. Palmer, Agnes Margaret Palmer, who was born in Manitoba, Canada, and died in Saskatchewan, Canada, is an extremely interesting woman with an extremely interesting family history. So let's get into it. So we've followed Beverly and Panaf's father's line. Let's look at the much more interesting mother line, because Winifred Agnes Margaret Palmer, she was extremely interesting, and her father was William Henry Palmer. Now, he was born on Halloween 1881 in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset, a place in England where we're going to come by a lot during this family tree. I can promise you, a lot of Jordan Peterson relatives are from Somerset. Somerset is just across the way, across the Severn from me, the Severn Estuary, and you get to Somerset. It's probably about 5 miles, 6 miles as the crow flies. And it used to be where the seat of power for the kings of Wessex were once upon a time. Down here, you've got William Henry Palmer, who's died in 1917. 31st of March. So obviously, casualty of World War One near Vimy in Pas-de-Calais in Nord Pas-de-Calais, France. So Winifred would have really got to know her father. She would have been 10 when he died, and she would have been brought up by her mother, who probably would have remarried Elizabeth Lee Harris, who was born in Bristol, Gloucestershire, and died in Surrey, British Columbia in Canada. Now, William Henry Palmer's father and mother were extremely important. William Palmer, Elizabeth Wookie. These are two extremely important names. William Palmer, of course, that's going to be an all right, interesting family tree. But Elizabeth Wookie is going to be a very interesting family tree. And down here, we've got two others. We've got Thomas Harris and Mary Agnes Lee. This is a very interesting line. One of the most interesting, right? Well, we can say down here, Thomas Harris. I found it hard to trace Thomas Harris easily. His mother Charlotte Harris, but I want to be sure about this. So there's still scope for more room on some of these family lines and for more discoveries. Like, a lot of the information can be refined, double checked, the dates updated when they're wrong or right. But a lot of this line now, I've had to make sure, double check, triple check, I'm not wrong. And when you get back to a certain point, you'll understand that I'm going by just what the records are, the public records. And I some of these family lines I'm going to go back to, well, they have got their family line publicly recorded, historically recorded, some in books. So it'd be very interesting. So we don't have to worry about Thomas Harris line at the moment. We're going to be looking at Mary Agnes Lee, Elizabeth Wookie, and William Palmer. And these three family lines are the most interesting. Let's start off. We'll probably go Agnes Lee, William Palmer, then Elizabeth Wookie. Though one may see us come close to a Wookie very soon after. Here we go, down in the Lee family. And we can see that Caleb Lee and Phyllis Lee gave birth to Mary Agnes Lee. And that Caleb Lee's father was a man called William Lee. And he was born in Wiltshire and died in Wiltshire. And Wiltshire is just east of Somerset in the south of England. The southwest, really, is Somerset and Wiltshire. Wiltshire's where you'll find Salisbury and Stonehenge. And you'll find that most of this family, though, are from Somerset. So Shepton Mallet in Somerset, Berkeley. And we go back to James Bennett here, Shepton Mallet in Somerset. He married Phyllis, who's from Beckington in Somerset. And down here on the other side of the family, Wiltshire and Somerset, so Elizabeth Lovelock. Lovelock, that's a nice name, and it's a name that there's a few famous Lovelocks. Few famous Lovelocks indeed. Some people will go, Lovelock? Does that mean he's related to so-and-so? Yeah, could be, but he's going to be related to a lot of people. We can see that he's got Parfit. Jordan B. Peterson's got Parfit In his family, he's got the Lucas, so Mary Lucas. Her father was Francis Lucas. Now, Lucas is an interesting name. Cornish, here you go, Cornwall. That's right down at the southwest, right at the tip of the southwest of the UK. And his father was from Wiltshire, and his mother was from Wiltshire. So how he got down to the Cornwall, he might have bought land down there, or maybe some of the other families from there. But as you see, the Lucas family historically seemed to be from Wiltshire. And we can get back to 1562. So we know that about 1500 is as early as the Norwegian records were going back. And we're slowly working our way up. We're working our way up. This is the best way to go. So since recording this, I have made extra discoveries on this part of the tree. So I'm adding this in. So I may say at some point, ooh, we've already found our first king, but we're actually about to find more than that. So we get to this area where John Knight marries Lady Anne Newcombe. And Lady Anne Newcome's father is Sir John Bryan Newcombe. Same name as his father, Sir John Bryan Newcombe. And they were of Saltfleetsby. And his father had married Lady Alice Gascoigne. And Gascoigne is quite a big family in itself. As you'll see, there's a nice picture there of Sir John Gascoigne. Let's just open that up in a new window if we can. Why not have a little check out of Sir John Gascoigne, the 5th Lord of Lassingcroft? And let's have a look what he looks like. Let's view his profile image. Get a little bit of a read on him. Oh, he's one of them small ones, like a lot of them are. But if we go in, he's got one hell of a ruff going on there. Ooh, that's one hell of a ruff he's got round his neck. That's one rough boy. That was a joke about ruffs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's what's round his neck, the fluffy thing that's round his neck. Anyway, he married Lady Annabel Vavasour, what a name, whose father was Sir John Vavasour, and mum was probably Lady Cicely Langdale, but I haven't checked these two here. I've been checking through this line more. Oop. Gone too far here. I've been looking at this Skipwith line because Lady Mary Skipwith, Lady of Walmsgate, married Thomas Newcombe, and it's this part of the family that's very interesting because Skipwith is from Sir John Skipwith, the Baron and Sheriff of Lincolnshire. So he's a Sheriff of Lincolnshire, as was his father, Sheriff of Lincolnshire, and a knight. And his wife was Lady Baroness Alice of Skipwith. You notice a Dymock name. It's got a little asterisk there because Dymock is a pretty important name. I think they've probably noted that down because of that. Now, her father was Sir Lionel Dymock. Her mum was Johanna Griffith. And if we come back to Sir Lionel Dymock's line, which I've already opened out, you'll see Sir Thomas Dymock. But on the other hand, on the other side, he marries Lady Margaret Wells. Now, this is very interesting. She was a part of the Waterton family. Another family will come up across here and there. But Lionel Wells was her father. Lionel, Lord of Wells, whose father was Udo Wells, and whose mother was Maud Greystock. And Udo, the Greystocks and the Cliffords, of course, the Cliffords being quite a big family, the Cliffords in another 100 odd years will start marrying into the Tudor lines. So we've got Ralph Greystock and Clifford here, and Udo Wells' parents, John Wells, Lord John Wells, who there's a little picture there of him, or at least a knight at some sort of celebration, and her mum. His mum was Eleanor Mowbray. Mowbray being a very big name. Now, if you see Mowbray, you start to think, "Ooh, that's royalty," and that's where we got to. You see, what that led to was me saying, "Okay, that means that's John Mowbray is her father, and Elizabeth Plantagenet is her mother." Plantagenet being of the Plantagenet line. So we already know down here Margaret Plantagenet, Plantagenet Brotherton, Edward II Plantagenet. So direct ancestor Jordan B. Peterson here. The first king we come across is Edward II, King of England. That's a pretty big king, though. That means everybody in the line and all the direct ancestors of Edward II and his wife, who was the daughter of King Philip of France. So again, a massive bloodline. Those go all the way back. Now that's all Jordan Peterson's direct ancestors as well. But not to stay on that side, the more noted side, the more notable side, I went down the Mowbray line. And of course, John Mowbray, Lord John Mowbray's father, also called John de Mowbray, who these guys were always away. They were regularly away in things like the Crusades back then. If we look at John Mowbray's profile, we'll see that he died in Turkey. And likelihood he died in Turkey because he was going on the Crusades. So his father would have been doing exactly the same, John de Mowbray, and he had married Joan of Lancaster. Of course, she's the daughter of Henry, the third Earl of Lancaster, so he's a pretty big deal. And he married Maud de Charworth, who was the daughter of Patrick VI, Lord of Kidwelly, which is in West Wales, de Charworth. If you notice at this stage, some of these royals are still being born in France and are dying in Wales. So, they're still relocating from the motherland. And he married Lady Isabella de Beauchamp. Now, we're going to get through some of this now. We're going to go, because we know that Isabella's father was William de Beauchamp, and this is where the lines get crazy. This is crazy influence. You never really know who these people are, but you'll see some of them. Now you'll see some of the names repeating, so you'll have heard of some of these people, I promise you, that are coming up. So Walter de Beauchamp, whose father was also Walter de Beauchamp, whose father was William de Beauchamp. And if you notice here, Walter de Beauchamp married Bertha de Brosse, and her mother was Bertha of Gloucester. Well, that's the same as Sybil de Brosse, whose mother was also Bertha of Scotland. So we get down to the point where there's not many people for them to marry into, so they're marrying into each other's family. But we'll come back and look at these guys in a sec. First of all, we'll look at William de Beauchamp, and that's as far as we go back to William de Beauchamp. But what I want to have a look at is this as a start. William de Beauchamp's mother was Maud de Valerie de Brosse, whose father was Philip de Brosse. You start to hear William de Brosse. Now you pronounce that Bruce. And whose father was Robert III, Robert Le Bruce. You see where that's going? So you see where that ancestors, and can you guess where they're from by this point? His wife was Gunnery d'Ivory. I would think Honora. I would think she's probably from Viking heritage. Robert III, Le Bruce, his father was Robert Lord of Bricks, Robert Le Bruce. And his father was Ragnvald II, Earl of Orkney, de Bruce, Ragnvald de Bruce. And this is when the Vikings were still in charge of a lot, especially of the northern houses, especially of the islands and Scotland. Now, his father has Rollo in the title, which means he's probably related to the Dukes of Normandy. Thorfinn the First, Rollo Einarsson. That's pretty important. That leads back to the Viking epics. So that goes back quite far, because the Viking epics, of course, go back to roughly, I think we could map it to about 170 AD. Torf Einar, Earl of Orkney, Ragnarvaldsson, whose father was Ragnvald the Wise, whose father was the King of Norway. Ulstein Ivarsson Glomar the Noisy Iverson, King of Norway, who was born 810, died about 870, whose father was Jarl of Upland, so probably King of the Upland, Ivar Upplandinga Halfdanson. So we know his name would be Halfdan, because his other name was Halfdanson. Hivitbein Svedson Gamel. So now we're at 750 BC, and we'll see we're going back. We get back on this line. We can actually probably go back further than Svidheidson if we followed some of the mother lines too. But that's a lot of lines to follow, and there's some other things if you notice, because Robert the Bruce here, Lord of Bricks, his father may be Ragnvald the Bruce. His mother was Alogia Vladimirovna. Now that doesn't sound very Scottish. She died in Scotland. She didn't get born in Scotland because her father was Vladimir the First, the Saint, the Great, Zvaclavich, the Grand Prince, and whose mother was Anna, Princess of the Byzantine Empire. Porphyrogentia. What a last name. Now, Vlad's father was Svaltoslav the First Igorovich. So I think now we're in Kiev, Russia, yeah. Who married Malusha Malkovna, Grand Duchess of Kiev, the Lubeck. And over here, Anna's parents were big as well. Romanus Porphyrogentius of the Byzantium, and he was the emperor of the Byzantine Empire. So the emperor. His wife was the princess of the Byzantine Empire, Helen Lekopine. Now, which way should we go here? Because let's hope it opens up without any problem. Because Sviatoslav the First, you can go back to Inga Horekson, whose father Rurik the First, who is the first Duke of Novgorod, apparently, is also the grandfather of his wife. Apparently, I haven't been able to confirm that, so I'm leaving it there, and I'm just going to follow this line, which I have been able to confirm. Massive elements of it. So his wife, of course, was Olga the Beauty, the Grand Duchess of Kiev, born 890, and her father was Oleg III, the Wise, the Grand Duke of Kiev, and her mum was Forenhinna Kettelsdatter. So again, you get back to the Scandinavian, Ingveld Kettelsdatter, and of course Kittel, the King of the Isles of Scots. So this is the Scottish king of 812 to 890, but the Isles of Scots probably mean Orkney, Shetlands, and those islands, which were extremely powerful back in the day. And you can see his wife's father was Kittel Vever of Romsdale. That's why she's Kittel's daughter. And his wife was Ingvild Kittel's daughter. Now, it could be that that's about 786. So her father was probably also called Kittel, and she's got the same. Her daughter got given that name that she has as well, same name as her. Now, the first Duke of Novgorod had married Afanda Umreska, whose father was Edward Erman of Norway, and over here we see Sigurd and Godfriedson of Russia is as far as we get back on there. So we can see that these guys are obviously massive because they end up marrying into what is really the Byzantine Empire. His Sviatoslav's wife, Malusha, was the daughter of the Prince of the Drevelians, Malk de Lubeck, and a woman named Rani. And here, it's so hard to name. Porphyrogentis of Byzantine. We're now looking along here again, the Byzantine lines. Constantine the seventh, Porphyrogentis of Byzantine. He was an emperor. Constantine the seventh, Emperor Constantine, whose father was Leo the sixth, the wise, Emperor Leo, whose father was Basilo the first. Her mother was Exido Ingera, or Empress of the Byzantine Empire. So obviously the husband was emperor as well. Now we can follow these lines back quite far because they're the Byzantine emperors. So there's records kept. I haven't gone back, but it's just the Byzantine emperors. We will go across the world like that very soon. And there's one more, if I can find it. Oh, I accidentally pressed something there. So close that up. So that's really interesting. That's the Robert the Bruce line. Here you go. That's from we followed these lines down that go from Robert the Bruce. So they're pretty important. But there's more. There's more lines. These lines are full of stuff. Here we've got Cecile de Rumilly. We're back again in about Battle of Hastings time, about just around 1066 here. Harwise de Pontefract. Now, I said earlier about the name Fear, and sometimes Ferre, it comes up, Fear. Now, Robert de Ferre, who was born in Derbyshire about 1100 AD, his father was Robert, the first Earl of Derby, another Earl of Derby. That's the second first Earl of Derby. The other one that Jordan Peterson's related to, of course, is on the Stanley line. And Hawaii's Vitra is the mother. Now, this is really important. The father is Andre de Vitra. Mother is Agnes Mortain. And you can follow Agnes Mortain back quite easily because her father is Robert, Count of Mortain de Conteville. This is the name that's going to come up again. And the mother is Maud de Montgomery. Now, Robert de Conteville, we're going to go past again. We're going to go past him again in another line later on Jordan B. Peterson's other part of his family tree. And his father was Roland de Conteville, and his mother is the mother of William the Conqueror. So we'll talk about that later. So Maud de Montgomery as well. There you go. The Montgomery line goes back quite far. And the Montgomery line marries the Talvas line. Talvas will also come across. We'll come across this person's father in two separate trees on the Savage line, I think it is, that we'll be taking a little bit later. And then, of course, Sybil de Bruce. That leads to the de Bruce family again. So Robert de Bruce and the like. And we see Bertha of Gloucester. And this route is also massively important. So I will say sometime in the rest of this episode, we found our first king. Well, now I've updated it. We found multiple emperors, multiple kings. We found Viking kings. We found the dukes, grand duchies. But we've also found this line, and this line's really important. NEWSPASTE. Here, Bernard de Newfmarsh in 1050, he dies in Breconshire. Born in France before 1066, dies in Breconshire. Very nice, very nice. Take over the land. And he married into a very important family. Nesta Firk Osborne of Hereford. So Firk, I think, is daughter of Osborne. Born about 1079 in Richard's Castle, so already quite prestigious, and there's a reason for that. Died in Breconshire, Wales, one of the most beautiful areas of Wales. Her father was Osborne le Scrope, hence her being Nesta Firk Osborne. And her mother was Nest Verk Griffith. And this is very important, especially for me, because her father, and we're not going to follow this line all the way down either, because we're going to catch up with this line in another part of the tree as well. This is King Griffith ap Llywelyn, born about 1007 in Gwynedd, Wales, one of the kings of Wales. And King of Gwynedd, Powys and Dwybarth was his father, Llywelyn ap Sicil, born 980 in Rhuddlan, in Flintshire. And Griffith ap Llywelyn's wife was apparently Algif, Queen Algif. Now, I can only really get that because that's the stained glass window that is actually by she's on there, he's on the other side, and she's noted down on the stained glass windows. But she is elsewhere as well, because you're talking kings and queens. So that's an addition. Let's continue. Going through time. It's very exciting. We found our first king. Right, my friends. How many? So, do you want to count? Do you want to count how many kings? I don't think you're going to want to by the end of this. Let's just keep going. Let's not give you any clues. I don't want to give you any clues. I don't want to give the game away. Let's not give the game away. Hello, my name is Johnny Vedmore, and I'm an independent journalist. And to remain being an independent journalist, I need your help and support. So, if you want to support the work and you like the content you just watched, please go to johnnyvedmore.com or to newspaste.com, and at the top you'll find ways to support me, including my Patreon. You can buy me a coffee, or you can drop me something on Ko-Fi, or you can tip me on a platform like Rockfin or YouTube. Any way you can find to help, even if it's like, share, subscribe, following me on a different platform. I really do appreciate it. Also, if you want me to go through your family tree in a video for you and your family, I'm available to hire. So please get in touch.
Students ask me sometimes why I study history. It's like, well, because history is about you. That's why. It's like history tells you who you are. You can't because you only live a little while. How the hell can you figure out who you are? And you need all this collective wisdom and all this dream-like information and all this mythology and all this narrative to inform you about what you are beyond what you see of yourself. Unless you're aware of the heroic stories of the past, and the metaphysics of consciousness, let's say, because you don't know what you are, what you could be, because you're a historical creature.